Hey guys, Andy N, spoken label, back in the house on a Friday afternoon. Yeah, unusual. But I'm a bit flawed today because I've had my COVID injection yesterday, so I'm a bit tired. But hey ho, never too tired to have a good chat to a fellow writer. So we've got the fantastic Ellen Butler with us today. Now, Ellen, I've been speaking to your agent through matchmaker.fm regarding yourself, of course. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself to everybody and tell them a little bit about yourself and where your writing originally came from.
Thanks for having me on Spoken Label to begin with, Andy. I appreciate you bringing me on. So my name is Ellen Butler. I live in the United States. I kind of grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, so politics has definitely been around and in my wheelhouse for a long time. Um, but last year we moved out of the DC area, kind of got out of the rat race to a place called Williamsburg, Virginia, which is a little bit further southern on the East Coast, not too far from the beach, which we enjoy. And I've been writing, let's see, my first book was published in 2014, and I've just released my 13th novel this month, as a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago.
Wow, that's good. That's good going, actually. That really, really good going through that amount of books over like was an 8 year period. As I told you off mic before, I'm a poet, or was a poet really. And I've done what 11 books in
Mhm.
12 years, but that's you completely outguns me there. So it's like, okay, obviously the plan is today. People are wondering. Ellen's going to go back on Spoken Label probably just after Christmas. We're going to do a full deep dive into two series. But this is a bit of a different podcast today. But to help understand what we're going to talk about, Ellen, is tell us about the process of how your process has changed over the years with all your books. Because I know you primed into two series, haven't you? So, and to do that many
Mhm.
books over that quicker period, you've obviously got it really going there into a good mechanism, definitely.
Right. So I actually started writing in the romance genre, believe it or not. I've got a
Mm,
romance series that was the first thing that came out, but in my romance, there's a lot of suspense, and I realized I really enjoyed writing the suspense more than the romance itself. So I kind of made a turn into the mystery, kind of cozy mystery, action adventure type of mystery. And so that's my Karina Cardinal mystery series. There's six in all in those. And then
mm.
I also have historical spy fiction. My grandfather was a cryptographer during World War II, and I just got very interested in World War II and reading books and watching some of the fabulous movies and miniseries that are out there. And I just that was kind of a passion project for me. I enjoyed, luckily, when I was writing it, I was still able to find a number of veterans that were still alive who had um, worked and participated in World War
Mm.
II. And so that was that's kind of a two-book series because there's a World War II and then there's a companion novel, which is a Cold War, which is about a different spy. They can really be read alone, but
Mm.
there's a little bit of a crossover uh, between the two books. And for every one of my books, there's always some sort of nugget or little bit that just kind of flares and gets my brain going on a storyline. Um, and so I thought that's what I thought we might talk about a little bit today
Yes,
and
please,
how to get
definitely.
that going.
That's what I
And
want. People wondering if that was the plan today, because I want to look at
yeah,
the art of the idea phase to the goal of obviously publication of your product. So, and that's why I thought it's good. And you're right, but you've told us a bit about your background of your books.
hmm
Now, these are two completely different genres, aren't they? So, did you
hmm
find they were completely different sort of products to actually write then, with the ideas?
Yeah, actually. So I don't know if you call it this in the UK, but here in the United States, we have what are called plotters and pansters. And the plotters are, you plot all the whole book out before you begin writing it. The pansters are, you got some ideas, you got a character or two in mind, and you just head into it. So I initially started writing, I was very much a panster for the romance. I knew who my two characters were, I kind of knew what their conflicts were going to be, and I knew what the suspense was going to be for the storyline. And I would just, head into it and my characters would bumble along and we'd make a story. And, after many edits, many drafts, we came forward with the story. And I had great editors, thank goodness, and publishers, and they, they were very helpful with that. But once I started into the mystery genre, once I started writing Karina Cardinal, I found that it was way too difficult and taking me far too long to write a story when I did not have a plot line. And I'd say, oh, well, I need to drop this clue or that clue for the mystery, and then I have to go back and rewrite parts, and it was just becoming far too difficult. And I realized that if I was going to write in the mystery genre and for the historical spy fiction as well, I
Yeah,
needed to plot. So that's been a bit of a pivot for me from my original work in romance, because in romance the main thing is the love story, the characters and their the conflicts of the characters and how they're going to end up happily ever after in the end. Well, that's not exactly the main thing, even though I do kind of have love interests in the Karina Cardinal. She actually goes through men. She's been through a couple since the beginning of the
whoops.
series. Well, she's Lord love her, she's very loyal to her friends, and she kind of falls into these adventures, and they're not all murder mysteries because I don't leave a string of dead people behind my character. I've got an art heist, I've got a diamond theft, I've got money laundering, and so I've tried to get her involved in a lot of different things, which she can get involved in because they're in Washington D.C. A lot of these types of things happen, and there was a political Capitol Hill murder mystery, so I did leave a dead person in her wake. But unlike a lot of these cozy mystery writers where there's just always dead people dropping like flies in this tiny little town, I
No,
didn't do
it's
that to
we
Karina.
get we get them in England sometimes. You do, and like you sat there thinking by the end of it, when say you've got 10 books into a series, and I'm not naming them. You're dead right, isn't that? I think if I lived there, I'd move away.
Right. Exactly. Well, that seems like a deadly little town. I don't want to go live there. um, so that is the one thing that I've tried to do with Karina is I've given her different avenues for mysteries, and what's allowed me to do that is I'm a total research junkie. I mean, I go down these rabbit holes, interviewing people, looking into newspaper articles or magazine articles, and obviously Googling. Thank God for Google,
Oh,
to
Google.
help me.
I agree with you. Google is fantastic. It's helped me out
Absolutely.
so much. It's scary. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what I don't. I'd probably be living at the library if not, And I think Google has made it a lot easier for us writers, fiction writers in particular, to move things along, because I do think that it used to take a lot longer for writers to write these stories when they had to rely on going to the library or trying to dig up somebody that they could interview and get some of this information on, or else they just made it up, which is fine because it's fiction. Um, it's funny, one of my favorite uh, reviews that another author was sharing one day, and someone had written like a 1-star review that said, I just think this author's just making things up.
Usually are. We usually are. So
It is fiction.
exactly.
Anyway,
If it weren't, it'd be
sorry,
non-fiction. Yeah.
little
Or was
diversion.
it? Or as my wife says, was it auto-fiction? She calls it. So yeah. So
Autofiction.
yeah. No, I agree.
Right.
Agree. Like it's and that obviously like I said before with the idea of you're looking about the idea phase itself. So obviously don't want to give too much away because obviously you've got to keep it mystery to some degree. But when you're doing your idea phases nowadays, and certainly in contrast to your beginning, have you found then like when you're doing your ideas now, it's different to what you were doing, say, a couple of years ago?
Um, yes and no. Obviously, when I was writing and when I started writing in the romance genre, and I've got five. My first five were in the women's fiction romance genre. And at that point, it was more the characters would come to me and what was the relationship going to be. Now, for instance, the most recent book that I just had come out was Karina Cardinal's. It's called Spectral Revelations, and it's got a ghost in it. Her aunt goes missing. She has to go down to Colonial Williamsburg to try and find out what has happened to her aunt. But the first thing was, well, I knew that I wanted to launch it, that it was going to come out in October, and I wanted to include some paranormal. I wanted to include, so down here in Williamsburg, There are tons of ghost tours around here. There's so much history because the Civil War came through here, the Revolutionary War came through here. This was the seat of government at one time. And so there's a lot of paranormal, let's say, history that goes on here. And so I knew that I wanted to incorporate. So I did a bunch of research. I read some books. I went on these ghost tours, and I kind of found a ghost that I decided I wanted to put into my story. So I kind of based my ghost in Karina Cardinal's story off of a ghost who supposedly haunts the Palmer House down in Colonial Williamsburg. And this was the Union lieutenant who was down here because this is the South, this was Confederate territory. They were down here, and he was the ranking officer commanding the troops, but the troops were rather unkind to the local women and everything. And this lieutenant found out that some of his men were harassing some of the local women, and he went out to tell them to stop and confront them. Well, one of his own men hauled off, didn't like that, and hauled off and shot him, and he died. And supposedly he was taken to the Palmer House where he died of his wounds, and he continued to haunt the house. And he's just kind of a friendly ghost. So that was the ghost that I decided to put in my own character story. And so, winding this whole story about where Aunt Vera is and everything, and how this ghost was going to help my character find her aunt, was just one of the ways that I developed in my head and in my mind. Where are we going to go with this story? How am I going to incorporate this ghost? Why is he going to be there? And what kind of clues was he going to provide her? And so that's just kind of one of the ways that, my brain would tick, tick, tick away. And of course, I did a lot of research of the area, the people, what happened. I did, research about the Civil War, what was happening here during the Civil War, to get an idea of the feel of what this ghost would be like. And then obviously modern day, because that's when the story takes place, of how my character is going to react, how she's going to react with the police when she reports her aunt missing. Why is her aunt missing? And we come to find out that where her aunt works, which is a museum, there are also some artifacts missing. So is she, is she on the lam with these artifacts? Did she catch someone maybe and something bad has happened to her? So all of those types of things are how my character has to figure it out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, of
that's,
course.
did a lot of interviews to try and work this little storyline.
Yeah, I know that from, obviously, you've told me before, Mike, I've got my first novel out shortly. That has
Mhm.
proved a bit of a bugger to write. And well, I'm not as disciplined as you are, probably with yours, but mine took me 12 years to write, would you believe? I've gone backwards and forwards in it. I've not been able to get the angle right. Where, as I was ironic, I've got the second book's nearly ready, but that's just flowing a lot quicker. And
Oh,
sometimes it goes that way. I think sometimes books. Do you find that
yes.
when you're doing them yourself? Like I said, you prepare yourself really well with it. It's obvious that. But have you found when some of your books, particularly when you get from the beginning to the end, are really stubborn books that they won't let themselves be wrote?
So it's funny you ask, because when I first started writing, this is the sixth Karina Cardinal. So the sixth Karina Cardinal was actually not going to be this book. It was going to be Karina. I have 30,000 words written of another novel, which is
Oh
quite a
yeah,
bit, considering these are about 75 to
yeah.
80, 70 to 80,000. So a little less than half of a book written. And actually was going to take place she was going to Venice. And so I had her going to Venice, and it was in dealing with drugs and drug dealers. And as I was writing it, I could not, every time I sat down, she wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with her. The story was not coming together, even though it's plotted. I mean, I have the notebook with all the plotting and everything in it. The characters, I wasn't happy with how it was all coming together, and I chucked it. And a lot of my friends are like, "Oh my God, are you going to
Wow,
write? Are you ever going to do anything with
that's
it?" And I
ruthless,
said,
ruthless. That completely.
"Yeah," because I wasn't happy. And I realized, and I was kind of whining to my husband, and I was like, "Oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to write? I've got this deadline I need to get to my editor." And so my 6-month deadline was now down to just a little over 3 months and 2 weeks.
Wow.
So I was like, "Oh, yeah." And he said, "Well, you love Halloween, and I do. If you see my house, it's crazy. I've got Halloween stuff everywhere because we do that
Good
in
to know.
America. I don't know in UK, you guys
It
do it,
depends
but we're a
where you
little
go
messed
over
up."
here. It depends where you go in UK. Sometimes, yes, definitely.
So he's like, "Why have you never written a Halloween story?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, why haven't I?" And we had done, a ghost tour down here in Williamsburg, and I reached out to one of the ghost tour operators, and I was like, "Hey, can we chat?" And so that's kind of how that developed. And I knew it was the right book to write when I literally wrote in 2 weeks, I wrote the outline for the book. And then it just came. Now, a lot of my books, and I think this happens to a lot of people, why you can struggle to get a book right is what we call the muddle in the middle,
Yeah, definitely.
where, right? I'm
Both
starting to get
related to
there
that.
now with the book that I'm writing now. You get kind of bored. You're like maybe 30, 40,000 words in, and you're like, oh, and your mind starts wandering. Oh, what about if I start writing about this? Or, oh, I've got to do laundry tonight or whatever, check my social media. And it's tough to like kind of refocus to get through because that's the part that is so important to write, but you're still kind of writing to that climax that you're trying to get to and can be very tough. And it really, honestly, a lot of it just takes discipline and sometimes maybe a little research to kind of boost you or get you going. Like, oh, maybe I need to look into researching this part or finding out more about how, this weapon or what's going to happen with the poison, or maybe I need to, whatever you're writing. I write mysteries, so people die and things like that. But
As they do.
um, sometimes people have to die, in
Yeah,
books. So that is one of the things that I've talked about, and I've actually attended webinars and sessions on about just getting through that muddle in the middle. And a lot of times when I talk with authors who are struggling, they're at that like 20, 30,000 word mark and they're lost. They don't know where to go, even though they may have an outline. And the best thing I could do is put yourself in that seat and just write and type. And some of it may be garbage that you end up chucking out at the end, but hopefully you've got something there that you can develop and refine and bring forward to where you need to be to that climax that you're trying to get to.
yeah, no, I agree completely with that. It's I said forward to my first book's out soon. I've gone down the romance approach, like you said, when I was relying on a character, and I had about half a dozen other characters around him, and it was just trying to maneuver more around chess pieces. And I realised halfway through it, I needed a plot more than I was giving it. But I was trying to let the
Hmm.
characters just tell me the way they wanted to go. So yeah, you do. It's I think it depends on the genre you go in sometimes, definitely.
Hmm.
Like I was interested to know about on a different side of things, obviously. Your cold spy novels, for example, like I said before, that's completely different, obviously, to you the other books you've done, your Karina Cardinal books. Now, obviously, how talk us through how you found what realized I'm getting words right now, so I'm a bit tired today. Sorry. How you found that you realized when you were starting these other books, like how your approach is going to change. Did you realize straight away, or did you find out when you jumped into those two books?
No, I realized straight away. I actually wrote the World War II spy novel first, and then I started the first Karina Cardinal novel. So when I went into the
Oh,
World War
right,
II's,
right.
yeah. So when I went into the World War II, The Brass Compass is a World War II spy novel that I started with. Um, I, I first of all, I researched that while writing some of my romances. I started researching that 2 years before I sat down to write it. Um, so a number of things I knew. Luckily, I was also able to interview a German man who was half Jewish, who spent time in one of Hitler's work camps, who was from Germany. And he gave me some invaluable information about the insight of the people, the places, and how things felt in Germany at that time. And I knew a couple of things. One, that I had to be aware of language. Um, for instance, at least Americans, they don't, back in that time, they did not use contractions as much as we do nowadays. And so that was kind of one of the focuses of things when I was writing it, to be aware of, the language and how they spoke, and that there was a little bit more formality to their speaking. Um, and so I definitely had to readjust my brain a little bit. And then during for the Cold War one, now the Cold War one takes place in 1952, East-West Berlin. We're in the middle of East
Mm.
Germany. And the plot is, and actually it was based on a true Soviet defector, Grigory Tukati, who actually defected into the hands from East Germany into West Germany, into the hands of the British. Um, I could find a little bit about him. We know that he defected. We don't exactly know how he defected, who he defected to. We just know when he defected, and that his family also successfully defected. And then the British, you guys, hid him from the Soviets because they feared for his life. But he was pretty high up in the Soviet Politburo, so he had a lot of really good information. I know that we got a ton. He defected actually in 1947, but I kind of took his story and created my own character and my own family um, to defect, that I used because I had my character. I knew who I wanted to use. It's a woman, and my characters tend to be women, and use that. That was my the little
Mm.
brainchild, little kernel to create the Operation Blackbird storyline. So also, again, though, when I was writing it, how did people behave? What were they wearing? And you got to remember, we don't have cell phones. I even had to do a lot of research on this because she has to make a connection from Germany, from Berlin, after a betrayal. So she doesn't know who she can trust. So she can't go back to the CIA office,
Mm.
so and make contact with her people, because she doesn't know who she can trust. So she has to reach out to someone that she knows in Washington, D.C. Well, you can just pick up a phone and make a long distance call at that point in time in 1952. So I had to do all this research. So we sent telegrams and that sort of thing. So absolutely, there was a change, and you really have to set your time back and how people are going to act. I mean, I even did, because at some point she has to go to the drugstore basically and get some things to change her looks, the looks of the defector and herself. With hair dye. So I did a bunch of research, like what kind of hair dye was out at that time. Could you buy it in Germany at that time?
Wow.
You know, um, and just like spectacles, hair dye, haircut, clothing, a way that you walk, maybe you add a limp and this sort. So I did a bunch of research also on spies and how they change their look, their gait, their speaking, maybe how fast they speak, how slow they speak, the timbre of their voice, and that sort of thing. So that was a lot of fun as well.
Wow. Now, I want to ask you a question that carrying on what your train of thought was then. Have you found yet you've done a major amount of research on something? And we don't have to say what book it was for, where you then discover you don't need it for that book, but then you realise a book or two later that bit of research will actually come in handy for something later on.
I found that more in the Karina Cardinal mysteries.
Yeah, I would
Yes.
have thought so. Yeah,
Um,
straight away with that.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. There's some research that I've done for some of the other earlier books that will come into play later down the road in a later book. I've even written scenes for a book that I decided to cut because they didn't fit right. But then I've taken that scene and stuck it in one of the later Karina Cardinal books. I've done that. And I have a feeling that's going to happen. Like I said, I have that 30,000 words. I have a feeling that some of the scenes that I wrote in there are going to be pulled at some point and stuck somewhere else, whether it's a conversation that Karina has with her current boyfriend, who's a security specialist, or she has conversations with some police, that sort of thing. I have a feeling that's what's going to happen, is I'm going to take those scenes and stick them in later.
Yeah, no, it makes sense because I can't think who's I read this from. Definitely read it somewhere saying for every book you write, you often need to write double what you've wrote with all the letting the characters breathe and stuff. So all the good stuff before you just concentrate on all the bad stuff. But yeah, I think that's what you've done there. Like you had to pull something because it didn't work. But it doesn't mean
Hmm.
that you won't be using it in the future straight away with it. So now
Right.
I want to move on a bit now anyway, because obviously, like I said, we've talked a lot about the ideas and the processing of it. But tell us about the goal line of publication, because I'm interested in learning a bit more about this from you next.
Right. So, one of the main things that when new authors in specific are coming towards me to talk to me and, oh, how do you do it? One of the main things is, you know, sit your sit yourself in the chair and write, get it done. And then, depending on what avenue you want to go. Luckily, authors have a lot of avenues nowadays. I'm what they call a hybrid author. I've been
I was,
published
can you tell us a bit about that?
traditionally.
Yeah, tell us a bit about that next, and we'll come back to the other in a minute because I know that's on your tagline. So your agent told me.
Right. So, I've been published in a number of different in a number of different ways, traditionally small press and independently published. But the main thing is that you need to, I think it's important, especially for authors who are just starting out, because when you're just starting out and you don't have a book written, you don't have a deadline. But once, you're getting publishing and everything like publishing contracts, or you have, contracts with editors, if you're independently publishing and you have a date, you're going to have deadlines that you need to write to. So you really need to figure out how you personally work. So if you're going to be a pantser, you may want to give yourself a little extra time than someone who is very, very methodical, plotting and everything like that, who knows that, okay, well, I can sit down and I can write, 2,000 words a day, and then I'll have will make me have, this book done by X date, and you kind of work backwards from your publication date. So I think it is very important for you when you're for new authors to kind of set their own deadline, even if it's only in your head and you haven't said, told anybody about it, but set your own deadline for when that book is going to be finished. And then I always recommend people say, well, should I get it formally edited before trying to find an agent or publisher and that sort of thing? And I always say, well, I would do the first 5 chapters. I would honestly have your first 5 chapters edited, because if there's a problem in your first 5 chapters and an editor's pointing that out now, then maybe you have other issues in that book that you need to go back and look at before you start putting it out towards agents and editors. Um, I think that's kind of important to figure that out. And as you get further along, you'll develop relationships with other authors and what I call beta readers. So folks that will read your stuff before you're even giving it to the editor. And now they have, gosh, I can't remember what they're calling them. I guess sensitivity readers, I think is what they're
Oh,
calling them. So
yeah,
folks, if
I
you're,
know that one, but I know I can see where it is. Yeah, but yeah, sorry.
yeah, so I don't know how things are outside of the United States, but in the United States, that's becoming a big thing, sensitivity readers, especially if you're writing um, like gay or trans people, a race that you are not a part of, and that sort of thing, to make sure that you're handling those characters and lines, the way you're writing those things are appropriate, I guess you want to say. Um, and maybe not offensive, but if they are offensive, there's a purpose for that. Um, I don't know how to say it any better than that.
No, no,
So
yeah, I get you mean. Like you trying to do it, being respectful to the people. That's the best
right,
way of putting it. Yeah,
respectful.
yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, that's better. Being respectful to these characters that you're creating. Um, so I do think that no matter what direction you're going in, you should make sure that you're doing that as well. And when you're just starting out, you don't have those connections. So I'm always telling authors, find writers groups, go to conferences, um, let other people know, and they will help you find those writer groups, or other authors, because it's a very solitary thing. As you know, writing is a very solitary thing, and we need other people in our lives to kind of help us make that balance, and also realize that other people are having the same struggles that we are.
yeah. No, I agree. Because on my first novel, which out shortly, I've had what, 7 beta readers on it, and they've all been massive helps in different ways.
Hmm.
And you found without that, my book would have been a lot worse than what it is. That's for sure with it. Yeah, no, I agree with you completely with that. So once you're
Yeah.
down to that stage, then tell us about what happens next. Then that'd be interesting to carry on.
All right. So you've gone through your beta readers, and let's say you do have a, you've already got an agent and you've got a contract, and so you pass it off to an editor at that point in time. It usually goes through, depending on what your contract is or who you're with. It can go anywhere from, gosh, I think the most I had was at a press where where it went through three different editors. Um, you had a main editor that you were working with, and then um, there was a copy editor. So you had basically a content editor, a copy editor, and maybe your content editor also copied edited. And then there would be another editor, whether that's a sensitivity editor or sometimes they have what do they call it? Like a fact checking type of editor. So they'll go through and kind of check the facts or the types of things that you're putting in there. I think that's especially like if you're writing in police procedural or something like that, they'll fact check and make sure, well, this is how the police would behave, or this is what, this report is called, or, little things like that. And then back and forthing. And then, once you finally have your final edits done with that, they'll go through it. You usually get a galley proof at some point, and then you're off to publication and out it comes. And it can be a very scary, nerve-wracking thing when it hits the streets. Um, and I've talked with other authors who tend to agree with me, maybe you will, but by the time my books come out, I am sick of them.
I
I
can
am,
relate to that one as well, definitely. I've gone for that.
and
Definitely.
and you're just right, and you're just like, oh, who's gonna read this? This is, by that time I'm like, oh, is this any good? Did I, But what's funny is I've gone back like a couple months or even a year or two later to look for a quote or pull some information, especially with Karina Cardinal. I'm like, well, I need to check on that. How did I write this up in a former book? And I'll start reading it and I'll kind of get involved and I'll be like, oh, hey, this was better than I thought. Oh, did I really write that passage? I mean, things that I didn't even remember writing. Oh, well, hey, that wasn't too bad. All right, well, okay. So that's just one of the things that I've experienced. I don't know. Other authors will tell me that they're pretty sick of because you've read it so many times, so many
God, yeah.
times.
I can relate to that. And it's like, Bill, I said, told you, Mike, I was a poet. And when you're writing a book, and I've had books that I've gone on for 6 years to write, and I've gone through
Hmm.
probably 200 poems to select down to 50. And that's been more
Wow.
drawn out than a novel has. The novels drove me crazy, but that's story another day. But you do, it's like, I think it's by the end, you've gone backwards and forwards, left and right, haven't you?
Hmm.
And have you found by the end of some of your books, now you've done more than a few, they're like, by the end of it, are you still at the end of some of these books thinking, thank God that's done? Or are you pumped up for the next book?
Yeah, no, I think it's a relief when it is done. And definitely when you're working with a publisher, obviously you tend to be working on another book. You're one or two books ahead because they can take a long time. The small press publishers tend to come out quickly, so maybe you're one ahead. But the larger presses, you can be two books ahead because they're often like when you contract with a big like a Simon and Schuster or something like that, that they're usually 2 years out. So when you contract, you're not going to see that book out on the streets and for 2 years, and then you're in the midst of writing other books, maybe the sequels or if you're writing a series, that sort of thing. So when it finally does hit the street, you're like, whew, now what? Um, hopefully you've got some ideas down the line. I know that so I have you think I write fast. I've got some romance writers who will put out 4 books a year. I don't know how they do it, but they do. And because romance writers are voracious, they will just, and that's the thing. They like it coming out very quickly. They can be a little bit shorter, 50, 60,000 words, but the romance writers will just eat it up. And so it amazes me that they can write that fast and get those books all together and then, just keep them coming out.
I don't know how to do it.
Um, well, and not only that, they're generally independently publishing, so they're getting their edits done to make sure it's clean and the formatting. And some of them will pay, I think, to have somebody format it and put all that stuff together and pop it out there. But I'm just amazed. I'm truly amazed. I do have a girlfriend actually who ghost writes for uh a company, I guess you could say, that publishes romances, and she will ghost write a book in a month.
I've heard of it because this is why I've not told you, but Amanda, my wife, she did it briefly that. and she was asked, she was
Mm.
contracted to write 80,000 words a month, and I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she did it.
Well, my girlfriend actually started having a lot of pain for the typing and everything like
Oh
that.
yeah,
So she started dictating. So she got this, dictation software where she would go out for walks or she'd go here or whatever, and she would dictate it and then stick it into her computer, and then it would, you know, do what it does on the and blah 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 and put it up there, and then she would edit from there. But one of the things with the ghostwriting that is a little bit easier. I don't want to say it's easy, but it's a little bit easier because she's given the plot, she's given the characters, she's given. I think she has to name the characters. Like she's given, okay, you have a female, she's this age, she's that age. Here's the plot. She's a baker. He's coming from out of town. Whatever, pick your Hallmark Channel movie, and then so she does have a lot of that set before her. So then she just has to, form the relationship, write the dialogue, create the conflict, and then resolve the conflict, and then have her happily ever after. So and because she also writes cozy mysteries herself. So she does say, I think, that it's a little bit easier to write those romances than writing the mysteries because it's a lot more thinking of where you're going to drop the clues and everything. So I think the genre also makes a difference. I think I've got another friend who writes in sci-fi. I find that very difficult to write because you're world building. It's a lot of writing.
yeah. No, agreed with that. I've got, like I said before, I've got a book pending that is definitely on the sci-fi side of things, and I found it easier to get the movement along with it, but harder
Mm.
because of the world building. So I think each genre you do has got its pitfalls, really, hasn't it? I think. And like, have you ever tried any genres yourself where? No, I'm not saying you've completely you've left alone because you think, oh no, it's not for me.
Yeah, I don't think sci-fi is really for me. I guess writing in the future, I'd rather write in the past than the future because I know it. So writing in the future, um, I think you have to have a lot of interest in science, period. Obviously, it's science fiction, but um, pinpointing what pieces and parts of science that you want to write. I did have, it's funny, I had an idea. I was talking with a sci-fi writer one time at a I don't know, we were having drinks at a bar at a conference. And I said, "Oh, I had this idea for science fiction." I was like, "We're somewhere in the future where titanium is like a super duper metal that everybody needs and stuff like that. And so people are digging up graves because, people have had hip replacements and that sort of thing. They have titanium knee, titanium hip, and they're digging up graves. So this is like a black market type of thing because there's a legal way also because the government is also having like legally people dig up graves to get this titanium because whatever this titanium is being used for, and that's what I didn't have. Is it being used for space travel, or what was it that we needed this titanium for? But I thought it was a little bit gruesome to be grave diggers and digging this
Oh,
all up.
yeah.
And the guy got all excited. He's like, "Yeah, let's write that." And I said, "This is all I got, dude, and I really don't write it." I was like, "If you want to write it, go to town. Just give me an acknowledgement at the bottom."
Oh God. Oh wow, Gravediggers, blimey. That'd be an interesting book to research. Definitely, if you have to go straight into if you can find the Gravediggers to talk to. Oh no.
Right. And
Oh
and
no.
just the whole thing of the black market. Oh, well, I got a hip for you. I've got X percentage of titanium, and what would that be worth? And I mean, the biggest thing would be why we would be digging up graves for this titanium. Like, what is it that we needed? And I think that's where the sci-fi comes in that I get lost on. That's where it's difficult for me to move past that idea of digging up
Yeah.
graves for titanium.
I know. I'm in a similar boat on the other side because my dad's 89 now, and he loves the westerns, and he keeps saying
Oh,
to me, 'cause he knows I write, "Oh, you've got to go writing a western." And I thought, I'd be like that with science fiction where I'll be coming unstuck. I'll be able to research it, but I think sometimes you've got to be there to actually do it, haven't you, to a degree? So I was like
yeah.
living 3,000 miles away, for say from Texas or something. I'd be a complete prat of myself. That's why. But yeah,
Yeah, I
no,
mean, you definitely do because I lived in Colorado for about 10 years. So I kind of feel you'd have to have I feel as though you've had to at least visited there and spent a little bit of time to feel how those people are and what that's like. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful country, beautiful land out there, and a lot of nothing, but a lot of flat, can be brown, so absolutely understand that. You have to go visit, but it would be a good reason to go visit.
Yeah, definitely that one. Make sure if I did it, I make sure I have several dictaphones with me and also a laptop
Hmm.
and also, oh no, in my case, tablet actually. I do a lot of my writing on tablets actually. So that's
Oh,
why.
okay.
But yeah, I was on last bit I want to talk about you today, Ellen, is obviously the use of technology itself. And obviously, because over time, like I said, for in my case, it'd be like I've got a tablet which is here actually, strange enough, here in front of me.
Oh,
So
nice.
now I got that as a contract with mobile about 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, and I've already just started using it past 18 months because when I'm out and around, it's much easier doing that than handwriting for me. But on your
Hmm.
process of your writing yourself, when you're writing, do you actually do a lot of your writing at home or do you do it when you're traveling, like say going to be in between meetings, etc.?
Um, I do it wherever. I do everything on my laptop. Well, I do actually, it's funny. I write my plots. Every time I start a new book, I get one of these spiral
Oh yeah,
binders and
yeah,
I plot everything in here. And I use this the entire time I'm writing it. So not only do I have plots in here, but like phone messages get put in the back. It's funny. So sometimes it's funny when I'm looking for a phone number and I realize, okay, well, I wrote that down and I was writing Karina Cardinal's 6 books. So I'll just go and look in there and I'll find the phone number that I need in the back of the spiral notebook. But otherwise it's my tablet and I will write at home. I've written in the car waiting for my kids, to come out of an appointment or whatever. I written at the coffee shop a lot. Sometimes actually I have to leave my house and go right at the coffee shop because I need to get away from things that might distract me, especially when I'm working on the muddle in the middle. Like I'll think, oh, I should go empty the dishwasher. Oh, I need to start a load of laundry. Oh, let's just check, on social media, which can be a black hole into itself. So when I go to the coffee shop, I don't sign on to the Wi-Fi so that I can just focus on that. And I won't, and it actually, surprisingly, even though there are people around, it cuts out other distractions that I think are easier to distract me when I'm at home.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I agree with you. It's a lot of well, this is going to change for me after next week. So I'm changing day jobs, but the last day job I did was a very short commute. But I'm back on the long commute next week in my case, and I know straight away then I'm going to be doing lots more writing going to and from work,
yeah.
and I'm back on an hour's lunch as well, so it'd be like be able to pop to the coffee shop most days and get a kind of diet coke and I sit there writing for an hour or so. But yeah, I think it depends, doesn't it? Like I said, it's I think when you're at home, I find when I'm at home sometimes I can easily get distracted. Do you find that
Hmm.
yourself sometimes when you're writing? You're trying to write and you easily get distracted, don't you, on it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, it doesn't help when you have kids.
I've just got a
They're
wife
they're
and
they're a good distractor.
we know to leave each other alone, so we're writing.
Yeah, so absolutely. And actually, I'll be honest, my husband can sometimes be a distraction because he does work from home, and sometimes he'll wander down and usually if I have my doors closed in my office, he just leaves me alone. But sometimes he'll wander and hey, you wanna have some lunch or what you doing or what you working on? And I'll allow myself to get distracted. Sometimes I'll say, okay, well, I'm really in the middle of something I need to finish up here. So it is easier sometimes to just step away from the house, to to exit those distractions and really focus. And like I said, sometimes I really need to do that during the muddle in the middle of the book, because that's also kind of the more boring part for us that we're just trying to get through, um, and onto the good parts that we're writing towards. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Now,
Sometimes you
just
gotta step out.
start wrapping up anyway. So, obviously, what are you working on at the moment then that you can reveal?
Right. So I've actually I'm starting a new series. I have a new character. Her name is Ariadne Winter. It takes place in 1958. She went to college and came out with a journalist degree and wanted to be a investigative reporter. However, back in 1958, that's not what women did, and so she was kind of laughed out of a number of newspaper offices, and she ends up at a ladies' home journal style magazine, so a ladies' fashion magazine. And she's finally getting her first break to go and do a real story on a famous actress. And the hotel that she's staying, or the little inn that she's staying at, um, the innkeeper is murdered, and it's kind of Agatha Christie style. Everyone at the inn is a suspect, and she decides to solve it, which will hopefully, kind of maybe launch the career that she'd like to have, which is investigative journalism.
Brilliant. Do you have any sort of ideas when this book's going to be out yet, or is that to be confirmed?
Yeah, I don't have an idea. It's a new book. We're kind of fishing it around. We'll see what happens with it. So
Well, good luck there, definitely. So now, obviously, we'll let you
thank
do the
you.
hard sell. You've been very kind to me with your time today, and it's been very informative as well. So, obviously, first of all, then, if people want to find out more about you, where do you recommend they go?
Probably my website, which is Ellen Butler. That's ELLENBUTLER.net. So ellenbutler.net. You can find
And
all sorts of things where I'm doing there. And then if you want to purchase any of my books, probably the best place for international is going to be on Amazon.
brilliant. So that's answered all my questions. It's been a pleasure today, and I'm looking forward to having a deep dive in your books next year, definitely. So it's been a fascinating chat today. So thank you very much, Ellen. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Anyway, guys and girls, that's it for Spoken Label today. I'm going to have a tea now before we go back to bed. But thank you again for Ellen. It's been a pleasure today. Really enjoyed this. As Don Callis over at AEW Wrestling says, stay safe and stay over.